Stardate 0512.2022. Welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod. Kind of smart, kind of funny podcast about new and classic Star Trek. I'm Mike Garcia, your reluctant captain, and with me on the view screen, here to help me break down the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, episode 2, is Clyde Haynes. What's up, Clyde?
Hey, Mike. It's good to be in the pod with you, man.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back after a short absence. But tonight we are down one crew member or one shipmate. Mariah is out hog hunting, allegedly, hunting hogs. Can you picture that?
I don't even picture Mariah as a meat eater. So
I don't know that she is, but okay, we'll put a pin in that. Maybe not the Star Trek podcast content people came for tonight, but Mariah will be back next week, and we should have a full house next week, and maybe some guests down the line to help us talk about this season of Strange New Worlds. But today we are going to talk about Children of the Comet. Before we get to that, I want to remind everybody to visit us at patreon.com/Star Trek Pod to get dive into our Star Trek fan Slack channel. And there you can check out a bunch of watch parties. There's essentially like watch alongs of old and new Trek shows going on every night in the Slack, pretty much. So check that out. And just follow us. Just go to StarTrekPod.co and you can sub to the podcast, sub to the YouTube channel there. And those are a couple ways you can support us. Also, if you're watching live, Clyde, tell people what they can do if they're watching live.
Well, if you're watching us live on the stream, there are two things that you can do to really feel like you are part of the show, right? One, if you have a comment, a question, you want to just say something to us and maybe we'll put in the show, then all we need you to do is to type capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod in the chat. And if you have a poignant thought about the show, when it comes that time, all we need you to do is to write capital HF and your thought in the pod, and we'll take a look at it.
All right, let's talk about the second episode of Strange New Worlds. I wasn't here for the premiere. We talked about the premiere last week, and I wasn't around. Real quick, before we get into what we're going to get into, I just want to say that I'm super excited about this show. I shared about it on Twitter, but it's almost like, I'm not going to say they perfected New Trek with Strange New Worlds, but I think we're getting there. I think this might be like the best version of New Trek that we've gotten since Discovery. Not to dog on Discovery, not to dog on Picard or anything. I do love those shows, but it just feels like Kurtzman and company are really building and learning from the past like several years since Disco started and are creating a first season because we watched the first 5 episodes because we got screeners. So I think, and that's half the season. Paramount was so
It's
confident.
only 10 episodes. I'm already disappointed.
Paramount was so confident that they sent out half the season to critics, and there wasn't. I mean, I'm really loving this show. So if the first 5 episodes are that good, then I think the back half of the season is probably going to be pretty good, and then season 2 is just going to get better and better. So I'm pretty excited about this show.
Hey, Mike, there's a lot of crazy talk out there that Strange New World is the best new Trek series, period, point blank, end of statement. Where are you in this debate?
I will say that it's one of my favorites. I've only seen 5 hours. We've gotten like 4 seasons of Disco, 2 seasons of Picard, 2 seasons of Lower Deck, so it's kind of hard to compare.
Don't forget Prodigy. Can't forget
Prodigy.
About the kids.
The quantity isn't there yet. So I don't know, and I don't want to divide people. I just want to state my opinion that I'm loving it, and I'm super happy about this. The golden age, this new golden age of Trek, just keeps like giving us more. But we're here to talk about episode 2.
I know. Before we get there, I want to say I agree with you, and I think what's interesting to me about Strange New Worlds is Disco feels like it's this not quite an anthology, but we get these seasons that are powerful with these big arcs, right? What's interesting to me about Strange New Worlds is this finally feels like the show. How do I say this and not offend people? This feels like the Grey's Anatomy of Star Trek, right? Like, this is the show that if Paramount wanted to, they're gonna run seasons forever about this. Like, the way it sets up, I feel like we easily could get 10, 12 seasons of this, right? Where characters evolve, we get new characters leave. Like, the way they've set it up, it just feels like it has longevity built into it.
I agree. I wouldn't call it the Grey's Anatomy of Star Trek. Not a huge fan of that show. I would call it the Fringe of Star Trek. Fringe did a
Okay.
great job of telling episodic stories, really intriguing episodic science fiction based stories that were weaved into long form plot arcs, narrative arcs, and had a lot of character growth within the episodes and seasons, which is what we're getting here. And it's exciting that we're getting that. We're getting a show that has that can tell us a potent story from beginning to end in 1 hour or 45 minutes, whatever it is, but then weave in these really great, compelling character arcs and development over an entire season, over an entire series. That's just good TV. But hey, it's time for hot breaks. All right. Episode 2 of Strange New Worlds, Children of the Comet, written by Henry Alonzo Myers and Sarah Tarkoff, directed by Maja Vrilo, who's directed lots of disco. Clyde, give me your hot freak on this episode.
So I think this was a good episode, right? I think when I think about the pilot, I was really excited. Like, the pilot gave me all kind of feels. This was more character building, and I really appreciated some of the things that we got to see. So we got to see parts of the ship that we hadn't seen before. We got to see some humor. We got to see a different kind of side of Uhura, right? I think what's interesting to me is I look at this and I go, we're getting kind of junior pre-swag Uhura, right? Like, a lot of people will look at this and go, well, I'm used to her being very confident, very sure of herself. Like, this is fresh out of college Uhura, and you got to think about it. What this takes place, what TOS is what? Are we, was it 8, 10 years later? What do we got? Do we know what
Ten,
timeline is?
10 years, yeah.
10 years. So you got to think about that. You think about somebody from when they're like 22, right? A cadet. And 10 years later, when we meet her and she's a grizzled veteran, she's been in these space combats. Like, if this is stuff, she would be very sure of herself 10 years later. So this is exciting to see somebody. This is the prequel of like how they got there. Right.
Right.
So I love that type of stuff. So it was great to see that we get a kind of a ship to ship dogfight battle. Like, this is shaping up to be a fun show. And we get to see a few things. And for me, while I was a little worried, I mean, when the away team stepped into that the transporter, and I'm looking at this and going, all right, you got Lon, she's not going anywhere. You got Spock. We know he's a lifer. Uhura, we know she makes it to TOS. And you got this guy. You got Kirk, and it's like, is he not gonna make it back? Like, already, I was
Huh?
like, we're
But
gonna
it's
see.
but it's not canon that he dies on this mission. He dies on
No,
another mission. So
no. And so it was just one of those things. And surely enough, he does something stupid, and I was like, okay. So we even get like Trek tropes. And
yeah.
so it's I thought this was a fun, good episode. I enjoyed it. It was a good watch.
I think this one probably hit a lot of like old Trek fans like in the sweet spot, right? You had a lot of
Mhm.
tropes, old Trek tropes, but it felt warm, it felt comfortable. The pacing was like pretty perfect. Like sometimes Disco's pacing can be a little rushed. Um, but the pacing here wasn't as slow as say 60s or, you know, Brannon Braga era Trek,
Mm.
but it was a good like midpoint between that and between like the super fast JJ Abrams action Trek, right? Um this was a very good episode of Star Trek. One thing I loved about it is that the show is already starting to fulfill the promise of developing the supporting characters in very compelling ways. Like you said with Uhura, right? Like the original series didn't often give Uhura a lot to do, and obviously her character development suffered because of that. But now, Strange New Worlds is here to say, hey, we can give you all the Captain Pike and all the Pike poof that you want, and I want it all. We can give you all the Spock that you want, all those heroics from these like two classic characters, but we're not going to give it to you at the expense of developing or propping up these other supporting characters like they did in the 60s series. Like Uhura was around, but she was in the background. Maybe throughout the entire 3 seasons, we saw her do something cool like 2 or 3 times, right? Now she's an actual character. So whether they're legacy characters like Uhura or newer characters, we're going to get to see more of that. And I think this show is even doing a better job than of developing these supporting characters or the entire bridge crew than Disco does. So like bravo to that. Like it felt like coming out of the last season of Discovery and going into Strange New Worlds, the Kurtzman and the creators were talking a lot about how this show would right what they saw not necessarily were wrongs, but that the original show didn't allow characters like Uhura to be explored or developed in a really compelling way. And I think that was a great promise about this show that they could do that. And I think they're really doing that so far. It's only been 2 episodes. Like I said, we saw 5 already. But I mean, the future's pretty bright for this show, is all I can say. So I really liked it, but it was pretty tropey, but I really enjoyed it. Um, let's get into some of the hot frakes that we have in the chat. So Carolyn K3 says Una saying maybe you don't have to ruin your life was really cringe. Like don't talk about disability like that. Oh yeah, there's this debate going on that a big idea that is haunting our Captain Pike, and maybe you guys talked about this last week, is he got a glimpse of his future in Discovery, and that is still hanging over his head in this episode. We see that i- in this great scene, this dinner scene, where it's just so perfect that Pike is the kind of captain that invites everybody over to his space apartment and is like, I'm gonna cook y'all ribs and stuff, and everybody come and hang out, bring your wine, dress down, it's all good. And his space apartment, I know it's captain's quarters, so I'm just gonna call it a space apartment because if I lived in space, I would want that to be my apartment.
I mean, that's like
It
a
was so cool.
space penthouse. Like I was
Yeah,
pimp. Like that was great.
the space condo. But there was a moment there when Uhura is talking about um I think he asked her about her 10-year plan, and he stumbles when he talks about the 10-year plan, and Una notices. And it does seem like they've been treating um Pike's eventual um disability as a death. But and there's a lot of people out there who do deal with these kinds of differently abled issues who do believe that it's a little harsh and we shouldn't necessarily be framing it that way, and those points are totally valid. I just perhaps see it as more of a character development for Pike, in terms of acceptance, and maybe he's going to develop a different way to look at this going forward. But how do you feel about that thread hanging over Pike's head, the fact that he is going to be he knows his fate, and we're slowly marching towards it.
I'm gonna be honest in that I think it makes sense, right? I read all the comments and I see people going, well, it's not death, it's not death, it's not death, and I completely agree. But we have the advantage of sitting here in the cheap seats and discussing how someone else is dealing with this. And I have to think that if and I'm not going to put this on anyone else. If I was facing down the kind of the certainty of knowing that my entire life was going to be changed, right? That I was going to get a a dis a disabling diagnosis, right? A catastrophic diagnosis that, and I say catastrophic in the fact that much of everything that I have planned for, hope for, how I view myself in my life is going to change drastically. I think for us to expect for him to get over that quickly isn't realistic. I think in the
Sure.
best of time, people who get diagnosed with something struggle with accepting that diagnosis. Right. And so I think that's where he is. And so do I believe that he will get over? I hope so. Right. But right now he's looking, going, man, there's all these things I wanted, and it doesn't feel like that's possible. Right. Like I've had a loved one who we thought early on in their life they were going to have a tremendous amount of issues. And so I've had to come with like, wow, what's that going to be like for them? Right? All these things that I thought was going to happen were not going to happen. And so I it takes a little while. Like I think we're being a little cavalier with kind of expecting him to be like, "Yep, I'm good. It's going to be great." And I think having someone like Una who's going, "Okay, at some point you've got to stop throwing a pity party for yourself. And at the very least, if you know you have 10 years, this is your opportunity to really focus on the 10 years and do to the best of your ability. And then hopefully in that time, you're going to be able to grow and accept and think about, well, how do I maximize my life? Like the benefit that he has is he knows it's coming, right? And so he gets to prepare for it.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think we're seeing him like grapple with it. And I mean, no one's going to have the perfect response to something like that right off the bat. And I don't even know if it's the point of view of the show that his eventual situation is framed as a death. It might just be the character's perception of it. And with somebody like Pike, you know that that is going to evolve. I mean, we saw a great arc where it was really haunting him in the first episode, in the premiere. He didn't even want to go back on the ship. And there was this great scene where the one of the biggest Star Trek tropes that Strange New Worlds inverted in the first episode was when a captain sees the ship for the first time after a long time. We see it in the motion picture, we've seen it in other movies and episodes, and then the captain is always like, "Wow, there's my ship, there's my baby," and it's like this glory shot of the ship, and the captain is really soaking it in and can't wait to get on the ship, and is really taking in that beautiful view of the ship, whether it's out in space or in space dock. And we got that scene in the premiere episode of Strange New Worlds with Pike, but Pike looked at the ship almost with contempt or with fear, because he was very uncomfortable going down this road again with this foreknowledge, and I thought that was a great inversion. So this show gets to play with, a lot of these tropes, these trick tropes. It gets to, like, place out in a very classic way, like we saw in this episode, and deepen them, but also, like, invert them too, so it's a good show. Um, Chupi has a hot freak. The captain's quarters are my new crush. Invite me to dinner. Loved the whole thing and even thought it was a horror show. Even though it was a horror show, I was still super taken by Spock. Peck is really killing it. Okay, before we dive into Uhura, Cecilia Rose Gooding, who's just knocking it out of the park as Uhura, How are you feeling about Peck? I thought he showed some like Nimoy chops in this episode.
I mean, I think in both episodes he's done a really good job. Um, I think we're having an interesting conversation. I was talking to someone earlier today, and they asked me, what did you think of Ito's performance as Guinan in Picard?" And I remarked, it's really challenging to play such an iconic character in a younger version of themselves. And so I think when you see someone doing it well, you're like, wow, congratulations. I understand the degree of difficulty. Peck is the same way to me. It's like to step into, like, you're talking about Leonard Nimoy's shoes. That's huge. And that's a big deal. And as we get glimpses of other people, like imagine someone wanting to step into McCoy's shoes, right? Like you're talking about some iconic characters here. And I feel like sometimes when you've seen them, they've screwed it up. Like I feel like we've got a young version of Picard, and I was just kind of like, who is this clown, right?
Tom Hardy.
Um, yes, I mean, but I don't. Tom Hardy's fine. I don't know that I appreciated the
You
performance.
you dissing on Shinzon, bro? In
I'm
front of me right now?
not so much
You're
Shinzon. I'm talking
dogging
about like
on
a
Shinzon, the man?
no,
Dude,
but
he grew up in the pits with the Remans, bro. His Reman brothers. He
yeah,
helped them rise up and
that's
take over Romulus, bro.
he's amazing.
All
My
right,
point
another day.
is, yes, another day we can have that's for Patreon. Um, Mike and Clive versus Shinzon.
Yeah,
My thought on Peck was, I'm not looking at him going not Nimoy, right? Like I'm not looking at him. I'm looking at him as this character is going, you're giving me more, and so I actually really like him. Like he's developing his own Spock, and I think it's got staying power. So I've actually been impressed with him, and it feels authentic and true.
yeah. I've been really impressed with him in this series. I liked him a lot in Discovery. I think it took him a few episodes to kind of really get into the character, and also the way the character was introduced was a little strange. Like he was, I don't want to go into it, but it was just a weird, like, way to introduce Spock. I think he was like mute for a whole episode when we first met him, and
I mean, not to mention, and this has nothing to do with Pack, but in Discovery, we were waiting on him to show up, so that
right,
anticipation, like,
was high.
it's hot. Whereas with Guinan, she shows up and you're like, oh, okay, right. This is like, okay, wait, I'm waiting. And each time he doesn't show up as mentioned in an episode, you're going, all right, where is he? This better be good. And so I think he's done a pretty good job in that. But you were saying that you like him.
I like him a lot. I think in this episode, it was great to see him develop or start to develop that relationship that he'll eventually have with Uhura that we've seen in the movies in the original series, and the pep talk moment was great because he doesn't he gives a very Vulcan-y pep talk, but then when he really showed some Nimoy chops to me was when he comes back with a real pep talk, and he really digs into the idea of singing and to make this work, because I think that the singing thing was a little corny and a little tropey. It was fine. It just wasn't great. But the idea that someone, a character like Spock, who rarely ever breaks down that logical barrier, decided that, oh, the logical thing to do here is to be a little whimsical and step out of myself and follow the lead of this cadet who's also being whimsical in order to save our lives. I thought that was such a great way to show us the dimensions of this version of Spock. You know, he can be a little whimsical. And then I know there's probably a lot of uproar right now over the laugh that we got at the end of the episode when the whole thing is like, in order for this comet not to crash into this planet and destroy it, Spock has to go and like microwave it down the middle in the in the shuttle, right? And the show does this really, at least at the time when it was happening, the show does this really odd, tropey, cliche thing that kind of makes us think, or perhaps tries to make us think, oh, did Spock not survive this? Is he okay? Which, of course, we know he is.
Mhm.
Um, and so there's that moment of, where's Mr. Spock? He accomplished his mission, but did he survive? And I'm just kind of checking my watch, like, of course he did. They're just going to show him on screen and everything's fine. But instead of him coming on the view screen and saying, Captain, mission accomplished, everything's fine, I'm heading home, or coming on the comm and saying that, we hear the laugh, which made that whole tropey moment of waiting to see whether or not he survived worth it for me. I just thought it was great. It was combining the old with the new, like the
Mhm.
trope of, oh, is this character dead or not? And then the new being seeing Spock show some emotion. And there's context built up for that display of emotion at the beginning of the episode that pays off at the end. Um, I haven't like looked on Twitter to see if people are upset about Spock laughing in this episode. What'd you think about that moment?
Yeah, I've heard some people talking about it. And my thought was simply, I've heard Data laugh, so this isn't a big deal for me, right? Like that was a little like, what the hell is that? Um Initially, this is the same type, like to your point, Mike. This is about showing emotion. This is about this balance between the logical and the emotion. And I think that's what's interesting about this version of Spock, that I feel like we it adds to the canon, if you will, is that TOS Spock was very much logical. Like we got a lot of like it was very much logic. And for him to be a Vulcan, or more accurately, half Vulcan, I feel like we're getting a fuller picture. And it'll be interesting to me to see if the Ethan Peck Spock graduates and evolves to a Leonard Nimoy Spock, right? Because we're getting a lot of pieces of Spock that we hadn't gotten before. That's much more, honestly, human. And like he's got a sister that he cares about, that he says he's worried about. He misses. Like these are things that we would not expect Leonard Nimoy Spock to say.
Yeah.
And so my question is, are the writers working to take him to this place where he's much more in control, a place where T'Pring would actually like him to be. So there's a
Mm.
so to me, they're very subtly a lot of interesting storylines and plot points ahead for Spock. Which
Yeah.
which is hard when you think about, this is a character we've seen not only in series but in films, and I feel like Spock has popped up in more things than most. Like Spock popped up in a J.J. Abrams version of Spock, right? Like it's just fascinating for a character we've seen so much of. There's even more to discover. It's exciting.
There is, and I might be an outlier here,
Uh-oh.
but in the fandom, but I don't care about like canon stuff if they can make it like if they can make it fit canon and they do it in a graceful way, that's cool, right? In terms of Spock or any of the characters or events that we see in these prequel series, especially this one. But if we get a whole different Spock than we've ever seen before that doesn't necessarily reconcile with a Spock we know from TOS or the TOS movies or even the Kelvinverse movies, but if the characterization of Spock is cool, if it's well written, if it's engaging and compelling in a different way, I say let's do it. I don't care.
Mike, you bring up an interesting point. Something that I don't think about is the Kelvin universe's Spock Uhura like relationship, right? And kind of where that sits in canon, for at least in my head, right? Because I felt like they had a very professional relationship in TOS. Um, it'll be interesting to see where this series goes. with that.
Yeah, I think it's one of the more exciting aspects. Also exciting, lots of exciting stuff about this series, Clyde, is again going back to Uhura. Kern's Hot Freak says we learned more about Uhura than we did in all of TOS or the movies. It was about time.
Hashtag facts.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think I think Celia Rose Gooding is doing a great job. She's the character has a real genuine sense of innocence and apprehension, but savvy and intelligence, right? She's probably one of the smartest people in that dinner. She can speak what? I mean, and
37 languages.
people are already underestimating her. It's like, "Oh, you can speak 12? Actually, I can speak 36. I had to learn 22 because I live in Kenya. 22 different languages. Plus, hello, this is Star Trek. There's 1,000 other languages. So I went ahead and learned all of them too." Oh, wow. And even the hazing stuff was kind of fun and kind of light, but the way she took it in stride was great. And then the sort of introduction that we got to Hemmer, and the blind Andorian
I
subspecies
I
character was
like
cool.
him. I like him a lot.
And you can kind of feel that they're giving Ahura a hard time in that episode in that scene where she meets them. Um, and it's not a real good look for her because she comes up and just offends him. And then you got Spock explaining to her what's going on, and it's not a good look for her. But then she comes back, and not only does she have a witty retort in Hemmer's native language, but also in Vulcan. And then she just walks away. And it's perfect. And right then and there, both of those characters who are very hard to impress earn a lot of respect for her. And I love that Uhura is finally getting that is finally being put on a pedestal as a character who is like um worthy of the respect of some of the more senior staff members. We got a little bit of that in the Abrams version, um, where Uhura got a lot more to do and was a lot more respected amongst her crew members. But with this series, I think they're taking it to a whole new level and giving us a character that is much more complex. So are you liking the performance first of all?
I am. I am. I think it's incredible in terms of what we're getting, this richness from all the characters. Um it'll be really interesting to see where they go with the questions. I mean with the character development.
I was a little iffy on the idea that her parents and her brother died tragically. I didn't really like why. I don't know. That just seemed kind of odd to like throw a bunch of trauma, but knowing this show, they'll turn it into fodder for like a good character-based story down the line, so I'm kind of holding judgment on that a little bit. I did like the idea that Uhura kind of doesn't she's not a Star Trek like tryhard. She's
Yeah.
not a Starfleet tryhard.
Which which is what we get most of the time, right? It's
Mhm.
all these people
Yeah.
like, it's the Enterprise.
Yeah.
I've wanted this my entire life.
Right.
I've made it. And then and Uhura's like, I don't know
Yeah.
if I want to be here.
Yeah. Because it does set up a dynamic for her to be a bit of an outsider and a bit of a newcomer, and for her to have a relationship where she can learn from somebody like Spock, who's like, "Yeah, I get that you don't necessarily know where you want to be in 10 years or where you belong, but hey, there are a lot of people who would kill to be in your spot. So maybe figure that shit out because you might be standing in someone else's way." And then as the episode goes on, she, she naturally, I think in this episode, she comes to understand that she is right where she needs to be, which is great. And I think Spock validated that at the end. And I really like the scene down on the Comet robot thing, jukebox, whatever it was, when Uhura is really doubting herself because I'm a cadet. I'm not supposed to be here. I shouldn't be the one here. And she's freaking out. And Spock is like, hey, the best thing you can do right now is take away all those I shouldn't be here and I'm not prepared thoughts and replace them with I am here. I am in the moment. And I have talents and I can figure this out. So just be present in the moment because you're all we have. And
Yeah.
I think that really thematically also it resonated with me because it felt like Spock was telling her to do that with her own life, to realize you are where you are, make the best of it. Um, that really resonated with me. I think if I had a mentor like that when I was a young cadet in Starfleet, that would have really helped me figure out what I wanted to do in Starfleet and where I wanted to go.
I think that's one of the things I'm really excited about that I like in this relationship is this mentor mentee
Yeah,
relationship because it really does help us. I mean, that's the leadership that we love about
yeah.
Trek, right? That's what we see so often. Um, and I'm also interested to see where the rest of the cast, the crew, especially the bridge crew, how they develop. One of the things that I think we love about Discovery is they seem like a very close bridge crew. When you think about TOS and TNG, like that bridge crew gets to be like a family within a family, right? I don't know that they're there yet. Like it feels like they're very new. Um, but Ortegas is funny. Ortegas makes me laugh. And I I think one thing that we've been seeing probably since I don't know that we saw it in TNG, but it feels like in every series since TNG, there's always somebody who dubs themselves the best pilot in Starfleet, right? There's always somebody who's like, I'm the best. And so to see Ortega's kind of look at like I'm the best early on, it's kind of neat. And we're actually seeing some pretty nifty work behind the con.
Episode 2, and we already got the Ortega's maneuver, right? Or the
Yes.
Ortega's defensive maneuver, which was actually pretty
Evasive
dope.
maneuver. Yeah.
The evasive maneuver, yeah. I was like, "Oh, that's a cute thing," but then when you actually see the animation of the ship, like,
Mhm.
dodge all those photon blasts, I was like,
And get hit by some because
"Yeah,
that's real,
mhm,
right?
yeah,
Like you're not gonna dodge them all. What you're doing is you're trying to reduce the amount of impacts you get. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah." That was a blast. Carolyn Kay has a hot freak. Uh, Lon did not feel like the character they established last week. They should have had a random down there to do that blah roll. That was a real weakness. You know, I wanted to bring Carolyn's comment up here because I agree. Um, if there was a weakness in this episode, it was like Lon was just there. Is it Lan or Lon? Noonan Singh.
Lon.
Lon. Okay.
Mhm.
Lon, I like Lon and I like the actor playing Lon. I think it's a strong role and strong performance. But in this episode, it was more like Lon was just there to look intimidating and act intimidating and to intimidate everybody around her and to be like just like a stuffy, you know, obstacle. Like it's like, hey Lon, can you help us sing? Nah, I'm not gonna do that. Um, we will see a lot more cool shit from Lon in this series, trust me, guys. But yeah, I think if there was a weakness, it was just kind of I guess focusing on one character for the most part here in terms of the development. Some of the other supporting characters got short shrift. Like we didn't even see Mbega.
Yeah, you're right. But it's interesting now that you mention it, Mike. I think what happened was you almost never beam down two, right? It's like four seems to be the standard away team configuration. But this was really a vehicle for Spock and Uhura. And so what happens is you beam down four, and then what you do is you immediately incapacitate one and you ignore the other. And so you get your dynamic duo that you can focus on. Yeah, I mean it didn't really like she seemed much more authoritative, much more sh- strong-willed and decisive in episode 1 than she did in episode 2. But I think that's probably just a plot device to
Yeah.
get us more one-on-one time with Spock and Uhura.
At least we got some space, some like FaceTime with her. I was
Yeah.
gonna say space time. Okay.
I also
Um,
have to say that I'm interested in seeing, when I think about when we came into this, what were the big questions that we had about this show. One of the things I think we were interested in was knowing more about Una,
yeah.
right? This number one character. This it feels like this is our first time up close and personal with number one. Um, I kind of want to know more about her and see if we'll get more information on her.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. I do like that she is we got more scenes here letting us know how deep her relationship really is with Pike
Mm-hmm.
in terms of their camaraderie, in terms of how private they are with each other, where she's essentially trying to knock him out of his anxiety about this coming issue that's going to happen to him in what 10 years or so. um but yeah, we didn't get a lot of her in this episode either. um I want to mention sudden but inevitable's comment. Uhura is the audience avatar for spouses asked to watch Trek.
Okay.
I think that's great because she's just kind of ambivalent about the whole thing. She's kind of like, okay, this is fine.
There's lots to talk about. Sam Kirk's mustache.
Okay, that was Sam Kirk was essentially there to make a Yahtzee joke, which the best part of that was Spock being like, "Yeah, bro, I know Yahtzee. Let's go," um, which was just another unexpected thing to hear out of Spock's mouth. First the Yahtzee thing, then the laughing at the end, and then singing. Lots of weird, unexpected Spock
Yeah.
shit in this episode. But okay, he was there to make a Yahtzee joke. He was there to also encourage Uhura. He seems like a really nice, genuine character who's also a dumbass because he's gonna go touch the shiny thing and get shocked. So
like,
yeah.
like for real. And people are like, "Hey, I think you should." No, no, no. But like, literally, the words is there's a charge building, right? That's more duck and cover than let me put my hand on this thing.
He is the kid who stuck his finger in the light socket or stuck a fork in the light socket like over and over again. He's the kid who, when they said, "Hey, don't touch that stovetop, it's hot," he put both hands on the stovetop when he was a kid. Yeah. That's Sam
Uh,
Kirk.
it'll be interesting to see what they do with this character because right now he is a bit of a buffoon. And it's funny because though that word, that name, Kirk, carries so much gravitas, right? To make a character that's pretty effectively a dumbass is funny to me,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's interesting that we talk more about his mustache than things he actually said or contribute to the scene. So
I love that, during the briefing, like it's not at the dinner, it's like at the actual briefing about the mission, and they're talking about specifics and what they can do about the comet to save this planet. Pike's like, mustache is kind of growing on me. Anyway,
so there's some
I
comments. There's some comments in the chat that really are saying that s- that moment where he steps up and touches it is basically TOS's version of sniffing flowers on strange planets, which they did do way too many times.
yeah, yeah.
So it's the but it's so to me it's funny. Like we laugh, um, but I think sometimes, especially in an episode like this where you've got a lot going on and it's hitting on kind of on leadership and mentorship and encouragement, you need some moments that are just kind of funny. And I think they could have leaned into it a little bit more. Like he bounced back, but it almost could have been like a real like bounce back, and maybe when he hit the ground he bounced a little bit. Like lean into the funny to me, and I would have been right there.
Yeah. I guess every show needs a buffoon, and ours is pencil porn stash Sam Kirk. Thank you very much. Um, we also didn't get to see a lot of Nurse Chapel, but we did get to see her flirt with Spock, which is always really fun, and I'm here for it. So
So Mike, there was some the minute that she popped up on screen, I
yeah,
immediately thought of you. I was like, Mike, he's this is gonna be his character. Like Chapel's gonna be the character for Mike. And I was like, at some
She's
point,
cool.
I'm not
She's
today,
just
not
cool.
today. I'm not asking this question today because we got to get to know her. At some point, I'm going to ask Mike. I'm going to force you to make a decision: Detmer or Chapel. Not today, but that's gonna come.
All
Give
right,
you some time to
this is
I,
not the content that 78% of our listeners want to hear. So,
no, we
but
keep going.
I know where you're coming from, and we'll get to it. But I am liking, I'm liking her. I'm liking this whole cast. Like that scene where they're doing the mission briefing, and Pike just automatically starts talking about the mustache for a beat, and it goes back, and then Sam makes a joke about it, and it goes back. This There is a lot of chemistry between these actors and this entire cast, where something like that joke within the briefing of a very serious mission can seem like a little odd, a little forced, but here it just feels like, oh, these are just it's just like a young family talking. Like it feels natural, it feels cool, and that's a sign of a cast that's really gelling, and of a writer's room that knows how to write for their actors and characters already. Like that's really encouraging about this. Uh, oh, Marge says the real contest is Detmer versus Ortega's Battle of the Pilots. I would also put there versus Tom Paris, right?
I mean, if we're talking about piloting skills alone, Paris falls out pretty fast in my book. Listen, I need to see more from Ortega's, but because really what I'm looking at, I'm thinking about what's fresh. Detmer flying through the quantum zone or whatever it was, and Ortega's doing that.
Yeah, Detmer flying through the quantum zone in Ant-Man 2 was excellent.
No, or whatever, when they were in the you know, just recently, I can't remember what it was.
Right, right, right.
Um, I, right now, I mean, I'm like, and I've seen a little bit more. I'm leaning toward Ortega's, but Detmer's kind of a badass though, so
Yeah.
I'm torn. I'm torn.
I would love to. Well, they kind of exist in the same time, don't they? Anyway, I was going to say I would love to see some cross referencing, like, oh, I learned this from Detmer, or I learned this from Ortega's, one or the other. That'd be kind of cool. So let's talk about the actual like mission plot of this episode. We had the shepherds, pretty on the nose, but the show hangs a lampshade on it. Like, okay, these these alien characters that are obstruction, and this plot is pretty Star Trekky. How guys like Pike
Hmm.
was kind of looking at us and telling us that, but there was kind of a cool twist because if you read about Star Trek and you read about some of the more out there, or maybe I don't know, left of field ideas Gene Roddenberry had that never made it to air, there's a lot of anti-religious sentiment within Roddenberry's version of Star Trek, which is fine. Um, and there's even an idea he had where he wanted Kirk to actually like fight Jesus in an episode, which is nuts. But here we get the idea that any type of religious fundamentalism is inherently destructive, right? Which is kind of in line with Star Trek, especially like in my favorite Star Trek DS9. So I didn't have a problem with it at all. And it kind of seemed okay. This is pretty standard Star Trek social commentary and moralizing, which is great. But I didn't see the twist coming at the end, where the thematic point was something akin to balancing faith with reason, and due diligence produces like the most desirable outcome, which is the preservation of life. Because the comet somehow um, knew the future, and the only way that the best outcome could happen, which was the preservation of this planet and helping it actually grow life, was for it to combine the ideas of faith. Oh, let the comet do what it's going to do, but also with the idea of reason, which is, oh, if the Enterprise crew sees that the comet's headed in a destructive direction, it's going to do something about it. So, and I guess the way I'm explaining it is a little like, I don't know, kind of hard to grasp. But do you get what I'm saying? Like the show did it
I
a lot more
do.
elegantly. Yeah. What'd you think
You're
about that?
saying what you're saying is faith can incorporate science and reason to
Yeah.
accomplish its goals.
Yes.
Blasphemy. No, no, I think that makes a lot of sense to me,
Yeah.
but that it makes sense to me. So I saw that and me, it was like it tracked, but like you said, that's a to me it was very Star Trek, right?
Hmm.
There's an asteroid coming to us to hit a planet. They don't know about it. They're completely unaware and unevolved to the point where they can tell it is up to us to save it. And turns out there is a force that's preventing us to do something, a challenge that is causing us not to do it. And then they threw in at the end, by the way, everything that happened was supposed to happen in order for this to happen. And it was like, oh, okay, cool. And to again, when I say it's Star Trekky, it's we saw this in DS9 with the prophets,
Yeah.
right? Like this is we're in that territory, and I love it.
I do like it, and maybe some people might gripe that, oh, that plays too much with fantasy. I don't want fantasy in my sci-fi, but if it provides a compelling twist to a tropey story, I'm all for it. Like it worked out great, I thought, and it just it's very Star Trek, like you said. Um, oh, sudden but inevitable says release the Jesus fight. I don't think they ever filmed that.
No,
Maybe we can reenact it, Clint.
no.
We'll find the band script and do that.
No, but all in all, Mike, I really did enjoy this. I can't wait to see more. Um, this is I don't know that I'm at a point because I feel like with Discovery, I got to a point where it was like, oh, it's Thursday. How soon can I watch this episode? Right. I don't know that I'm in that point. Right.
Really?
But I'm in a point where it's like, oh, it's Thursday. Strange New Worlds is coming out. I'm going to watch it. Right. This isn't one that I'm going to wait till Friday for.
Right.
Um,
Can you
but
rank? Do you think you can rank yet? Like
yes,
maybe not in like the best, just like how you're feeling now. Like which show
yes.
is one
It
to
it is
four or whatever.
easy for me, but that's because for me, my ranking will change,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's mine is dynamic; it's not static at all. So if you wanna bring this back up in my face later, I'll just say I changed my mind. And that is right now for me. It is I would definitely go Discovery, Strange New Worlds. Do you want more than that? You want me to rank? Are you talking about
Right.
new
Yeah.
or
New. Rank all
forever? Okay,
the
okay.
new live action shows. So Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and Picard.
Okay. All right. Well, I was gonna toss in the animated ones, but it is in that order: Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and Picard.
Yeah. Yeah. This is
Lower
probably
Decks for me is above Picard right
okay.
now, but much closer than it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is probably just like stupid lizard brain recency bias, but I'm just gonna say Strange New Worlds,
Ooh.
number one, Discovery and Picard, right now. Because it's a
Okay.
show I'm watching and I'm really enjoying. And when they sent it to those screeners, I did just devoured them. I couldn't stop watching it, and I can't wait for episode 6, which is the one I haven't seen. So
Yeah.
I'm probably showing my hand and how I feel about the other episodes, but there's a lot more nuance to talk about in terms of those other episodes. So
Yeah. I think what I like, um, and while this one could move up, is I like the episodic nature.
yeah, me too.
Right? Because to me, it there's I feel like my world is so full with stuff to do. Discovery is okay, now I really got to remember exactly what happened last week because it's really just going to pick up right where they left off. So it's this continuation of this long story. This is back to like, I'm gonna sit down for an hour. I'm gonna ingest this. I'm gonna enjoy it, and then I'm not gonna be left hanging like, oh, what happens next? Are they gonna get out of that? Whatever.
Yeah.
And I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, I second what Marge is saying in the comments. The episodic format allows so much more freedom and flexibility. It's true. They can do a new story every week. They can even do a mini plot arc of 2 episodes and have a beginning, middle, and end. And we can literally visit strange new worlds every time. And mentioning that, I really liked the alien design of the aliens that were on the planet. I thought they looked amazing. The makeup and the mask were really convincing and really great. And w- while the Enterprise didn't exactly send an away team down there to visit that world, we still got a look at a strange new world, which is something that this show has promised for pretty much every episode. You're going to see strange new worlds. You're going to see new aliens, and we're going to go somewhere different every episode, and that's pretty exciting. Oh,
Agreed, man. What's up?
and people are with you. Stress free K says Disco number 1, Strange New Worlds number 2, Lower Decks 4, and Picard. So
I I mean, disco for me is just the again, right now we're looking at 2 to 5 episodes. We got a lot of disco. And when I look at disco and I think about not only um Burnham and Book and like I when I think of Stamets, right? Hammer seems interesting, right? But you've got Stamets and you've got Jet, Reno, like they're just characters there that I really like. And then what they did with like Owo and Detmer in the last couple seasons,
yeah,
and really Bryce and developing those characters, and then adding, you know, Van, like it's just so deep, it's so much deeper right now that holds me.
yeah.
We're just getting started with Strange New Worlds, and there's an opportunity for it to be that and more possibly.
I hear you, and I think the promise is there because we've seen 2 episodes. These actors and this crew is already gelling. We're
Mhm.
already getting some depth and some great like back and forth between them. Some great chemistry. Imagine 3 seasons down the line
Mm.
how great that chemistry is going to be. Like, oh, I can't wait. But yeah, I was into this episode. I'm really looking forward to the next one. Sounds like you are too. Everyone,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us tonight. Anything else you want to say about this episode of Strange New Worlds, Clyde?
No, I would encourage you, if you can, rewatch it. It's a good one.
You can visit us at StarTrekPod.co. You can subscribe to the pod there and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And Clyde, where can people find us on social?
You can find us at StarTrekPod.co, and at Star Trek Pod on our socials.
And visit patreon.com/Star Trek Pod. Dive into that um, Star Trek fan Slack channel for just $2 an episode. You're going to talk to a ton of positive Star Trek fans, having watch parties all the time, just talking Trek. We got a spoiler channel in there. You can mute that if you want, but it's really fun to dive into those new episodes in that spoiler chat. So patreon.com/Star Trek Pod. We also have bonus pods up there. And we will be back next week. And hopefully we'll have a full house with Mariah back after she's done hunting hogs. We're going to have to get that story when she comes back. All
I'm
right, everyone.
expecting her to have a new motorcycle.
Live long and prosper.